We are living in difficult times, times of a lot of social, economic, and political change. These are times that require not only competent and effective leaders, but also different leaders, leaders with values, leaders with a sense of their impact in society. And this is where we strongly believe that educational institutions have to play a role. Can we really address those challenges? Can we provide students with the tools they need to adapt to this world? To reflect on all these issues, I am meeting today with Ben Nelson, who is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Minerva, an institution that has reimagined higher education from the ground up. Let's move to education.
Sure.
And, I told you that I first discovered about Minerva through a paper that it was an article in a big magazine, big used magazine, and I was really interested by the concept. But let me ask you about your concept. How did you develop this idea of Minerva as a new university for the time we live in?
Initially, the idea was looking at what a university should be providing to its students. In the American tradition, there is this concept of the liberal arts education. And the funny or sad or both aspect of this is that practically no one on the planet knows what liberal arts means. When people hear that, they think, oh, that means poetry or, literature. And it actually has nothing to do with that. The liberal arts were the disciplines or arts that allow you to be free or have liberty. And the concept was that in the 18th century, when Europe was ruled primarily under monarchy, the concept of a country was that it would consist of the subjects of the sovereign, of the king or queen, or both. And in that environment, subjects needed to be basically controlled and had a particular life trajectory in service of the kingdom.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Your parents were farmers, you were a farmer. Your dad was the town doctor, you're going to be the town doctor, right? And so there was this concept of perpetuation.
Yeah.
And university served one aspect in that. And of course there was, if you wanted to go into the priesthood, you needed a separate education because you couldn't be born into the priesthood, so you had a separate track. In the United States, the founding fathers of the country thought, we don't want a society where the sovereign is the king. We want a society where the sovereign are the enfranchised citizens. And in this model, you still had this concept of, I'm going to have a vocation or, training for much of my life, but at any point during my career, I can be called upon by my fellow citizens to serve, such that I may one day be a farmer, and the next day I'll be asked to be a diplomat. Or one day I'm going to be a shopkeeper, and the next day I may be a senator. And so that concept of changing careers, of being able to serve not just a vocation, but more broadly a society, being a citizen.
That's
exactly.
Right. That's right.
Was radically new. And they needed to form a different kind of university, different kind of educational system to enable that. And, in the 18th century, as brilliant as many of these founding fathers were, we had a very limited understanding of both how the brain works and on what you actually should know about the world. And so the way in which American universities went about providing liberal arts education was an interesting attempt, but fundamentally flawed in many ways. It was about curating a whole bunch of classical content and saying, know this, and then you will be a well-educated person. And that's okay. But certainly in the 20th century, let alone in the 21st century, that model started to break down. And in the 1960s, students rebelled against this concept wholesale in the United States, and effectively it was thrown out. And what it was replaced with was effectively nothing. So students still study a subject matter in depth, a major, but spend substantially less time on it than they do in Europe, which is interesting. So you get like a degraded version. And then The rest of their time, they basically do whatever they want. And it's been primarily edutainment. Oh, I'm kind of interested in this, I'm kind of interested in that, let me take this course, that course. And as you said, many of those classes were delivered in lectures, which are very effective ways, as I once heard described, of getting the professor's notes transferred to the student's notes without passing through the brains of either.
That's right.
Right? Because there's
Just
really no
repeating
processing.
stuff that is there, yeah. But there's no processing, there's no judgment, there's no analysis. That's right.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And so Minerva was an attempt to think through how you can create a curriculum that actually rewires the brain, that gives you frameworks of thinking that you can apply no matter what you do, whether you're going to be that farmer or the diplomat or the doctor
the
or
content, the specific
exactly.
content that you are
Exactly
trying
right.
to study. What is your vision in that sense about how the world is evolving politically? Because it's not evolving in that line necessarily.
No, it's evolving in the exact opposite
That's
direction.
right. What is your reflection on that? When you move your students to a country which doesn't practice democratic values,
Yeah.
how do you approach that?
For me, it's actually the broader thesis. The reason that I started working on this curriculum 25 years ago is because I believed that a population that doesn't have those disciplines that allow them to be free, right, the liberal arts, will effectively wind up where we are today. This is why it became an obsession of mine 25 years ago. This is why 9 years ago I started building Minerva. And if you looked at the world 9 years ago, you wouldn't necessarily think it was going in that direction, right? You'd be like, oh, this is more recent phenomenon. It's not. It's been going on for a long time. And the perspective really is that if you take a complex systems approach, the reason that the world is tipping towards autocracy isn't the same reason it was tipping towards autocracy in the 18th or 19th century, where you had individuals seizing power. Now, it's actually popular autocracy, right? It's populism.
It's delegating power.
Exactly. It's delegated
That's right.
from the
It's the people
sovereign.
delegating power, yeah.
After starting Minerva, I read Doris Kearns Goodwin's great book, Team of Rivals. And, of course, had great lessons about working with people you disagree with and all the rest. But to me, the big aha moment was it describes how Lincoln was managing the Civil War and made colossal mistakes. I mean, just unbelievably bad decisions. Yeah. And then had 6 months to think about it and course correct. I mean, think about that in today's warfare. I mean, forget, back then, to think about World War II, right? Think about, even less than 100 years later, let alone, today's world, you have no time to react to anything. And so as the world is getting infinitely faster and more complicated, more complex, education is getting worse. This is a recipe for disaster.
Let's move to another topic, which is very much as well in a topic of our times, which is technology. Yeah. Everything is read through technology. Yeah. Technology is the deus ex machina for everything that we can talk about. How do you read technology and technological disruption in Minerva?
Well, I mean, for us, Minerva wouldn't exist without technology. When I first started thinking about the Minerva curriculum 25 years ago, it wasn't in the context of a new institution, the context of reforming the university I was attending. The browser, the graphical user interface browser didn't exist, right? This was, 1993. And so I couldn't even imagine of what technology could play into it. And so, the way that I initially thought of the curriculum was very, very, it was different than what existed, but it was traditional. As I came back to the endeavor 9 years ago, now in the world of the internet, in the world of data-mediated environments, all of a sudden, it allowed me to think about institutional design from a perspective of effective curricular delivery. And this was very different because in a world where we needed to get students in a classroom with a professor, the unit of delivery was the class. That really is the only way to do it. But in a world where technology and data follows a student, all of a sudden, education could be institutional. And this is a radical thing because, again, in most historical contexts, education was institutional, right? In the 19th century, and the better part of the 20th century, the vast majority of your time in college, you went through a core curriculum, right? And that is because the institution has come up with a pathway of intellectual development. But a proliferation of information has broken that down. And effectively has created...
broken the monopoly, if you want, of knowledge and information.
It's correct. You want to choose what to learn,
choose,
right?
And it's free, and that's...
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing.
Yeah.
The problem is that delivered offline, you then lose any kind of institutional thumbprint. Of course, the professor that you have and the way they deliver a course and the insights that you generate, by the way, not just from your professor, but from your peers, will shape your educational pathway. But at the same time, technology allows you to create a scaffold. It allows you to actually curate the intellectual development of the student over time. And that's a revolution. Uber, Lyft, Didi, etc. These were companies that did think ahead of time. And again, it's a relatively simple solution. Rather than waiting for a taxi and hailing them on the street, order it on the phone and have them come to you, right? Now, how it's implemented, whether it should be with taxis, whether it should be with individual drivers, a lot of debates either way. But the point is, the technology was designed for the purpose that it was built for. Nothing more, nothing less. And yes, the product improves over time and you add features and functions.
There was a theory behind it.
But there was a theory behind it. And it is technology at its best, figuring out a solution to a fundamental friction in the world. And that's the same perspective in education. Not how do we use technology to deliver the same education that we do offline in incrementally different ways.
But what are the educational needs we need to solve and how technology can help.
Exactly.
The same can be said about the role of teachers, let's say, because we had a role of teachers that was constrained by the lack of technology, by limited technology that they have. How all these possibilities of technology also have to rewire the teacher? And
definitely. So look, much to your point, Gutenberg has not reformed teaching enough, enough, right? I mean, and so it is shocking how resilient that has been. But professors need to stop professing. The lecturers need to stop lecturing, right? The nature of the term needs to change because their job is a process of intellectual development. It is to coax deep processing.
It's not transferring stuff. It is something different.
Exactly.
It's developing others. Yeah, that's right.
And the fact of the matter is that professors don't get trained how to teach. You know, if you look at the path to becoming a professor, right? They go to school, they go to university, they go to get their PhD, they go assistant professor. At no point do they actually go through a course on how to teach.
Let me ask you something about, the classroom, which has been this professor that professes and the classroom where accumulating people have been the technologies of education for centuries. You know? How is your view of the classroom? I understand that you make the classrooms transparent, that you record everything that's happening there, and that helps the student to learn about how he has been doing. Of course, it's a very interactive class. Yeah. It's not lectures. But tell us about that.
Yeah, so you know, the physical limitations of an offline environment are vast, right? Unless you have, a camera pointed in every face, having cameras all around you, different angles, etc., voice recognition so you know what student is saying what. If you have an interactive class, if the class's goal isn't to transmit information, but to enable student application of that information, if students don't get feedback on how they apply, That's a bit of a moot
useful,
point.
that's right.
You think about every university wants to teach critical
Pedro Arrupe, a former Father General of the Jesuits, referred to the crucial role that excellence plays in education, and he indicated that our students should also be open to the signs of times, in harmony with the culture and problems of their surroundings. These words still inspire and motivate us working in education.